Bienvenidos! Today we're going to talk about direct object pronouns in Spanish. Direct object pronouns in Spanish are very similar to direct object pronouns in English in that direct object pronouns are simply a pronoun that is receiving the action of a verb in a sentence. So for example, in this question, when do you see the boy? We need to find our verb, which is see, and then we need to find the noun that's receiving the action of the verb. We know that you is doing the action. When do you see? And then it would be the boy receiving the action. That's our direct object. Now, if we wanted to use a direct object pronoun in English, instead of saying the boy, we could say, when do you see him? So that's our direct object pronoun. And today we're going to talk about how to use direct object pronouns in Spanish. Now, I made a list here of the direct object pronouns in English and their Spanish equivalents. Now, in Spanish, we know that pronouns have a little bit more complex nature because of the formal, informal, plural, and singular. And it's similar for the direct object pronouns. So some of them are matched one-on-one for the English pronouns, and some of them there are multiple versions in Spanish. So for the direct object pronoun me, it would be me, him, lo, her, la, us, nos. It can be lo or la, depending on if the object we're talking about is feminine or masculine. Them can be los or las, again depending on if the them that we're talking about is masculine or feminine. And then for you, I've divided it up into you singular and you plural. If we're talking about you singular, then it would be lo, la, or te. Now the te is our familiar you, and the lo and la are the usted version, the formal you, and we have to know if the you is feminine or masculine. So for singular you, we have three different options for our direct object pronouns. For you plural, we also have two options because this would be the ustedes form. We have los or las, depending on if it's masculine or feminine. Now, looking at this list, we can make a sentence in Spanish and pick our Spanish direct object pronoun that we're going to need to use in the sentence. So we're going to talk about three different kinds of sentences that we can use direct object pronouns in today. The first type would be just a simple conjugated verb, where we're going to use direct object pronoun with that verb. The second type of sentence would be when we have a verb phrase that includes an infinitive verb, because the direct object pronoun behaves a little differently with the infinitive verb. And we also are going to talk about how to use the direct object pronouns with the present progressive verb tense. So let's take a look at our first example. When do you see the boy, or when do you see him? We're going to use that in Spanish. ¿Cuándo ves tú al niño? Now this would be when do you see the boy? Now notice that I put tú in parentheses. When I put it in parentheses, that just means it's optional. So in Spanish, we don't have to say the tú with the two form of verbs. We could just say, ¿Cuándo ves al niño? Okay, so in this sentence, our verb is ves, and the noun that's receiving the action of the verb is our direct object, and that would be al niño. So in order to pick a direct object pronoun, we can go look at our list and see what we would pick. Are we going to use me, lo, la? We have all these choices, but we know niño is going to be, al niño is going to be him. So we're going to use lo. Now, the difference between English and Spanish is in English, the direct object pronoun comes after the verb. But in Spanish, it comes before the verb in most cases. So in this sentence, we need to put lo before the verb. Cuando lo ves. Okay. Optionally, we could have the tú. Cuando lo ves tú, when do you see him? And this is also a difference. We could also go ahead and put the direct object in the sentence. So we can have the pronoun and the original direct object noun in the same sentence. We don't do that in English. Cuando lo ves tú al niño? Okay, so when do you see him, the boy? We wouldn't say that in English, but in Spanish it's okay. So let's do another sentence. Let's answer the question. Veo al niño los lunes. Okay, so I see the boy on Mondays. Okay. So the verb is veo. And the direct object receiving the action of the verb is al niño again. And we're still going to use the same direct object pronoun, lo, and we're going to put it before the verb. Lo veo al niño los lunes. Again, we can keep that direct object in the sentence in Spanish. We wouldn't say that in English, we can do it in Spanish. So we could say, lo veo al niño los lunes, or just simply, lo veo los lunes. So literally it means him, I see the boy on Mondays. And that would be okay. Or we can leave that out and just say, lo veo los lunes. Alright, so that's how we use direct object pronouns with a simple verb. Now if we wanted to negate these sentences and say, I don't see him on Mondays, we would just put a no in front of the sentence. No veo al niño los lunes. No lo veo al niño los lunes. Notice that the direct object pronoun stays right next to that verb. So the no comes before the direct object pronoun. If we wanted to change this to plural and say the boys, veo los niños los lunes. We could say, we need to pick a different pronoun, don't we? Because we couldn't say him, we'd have to say them. So our direct object pronoun would be los. Los veo. Los veo a los niños los lunes. Okay, so we could say, I see the boys on Mondays. Them, I see the boys on Mondays. Them, I see on Mondays. Los veo los lunes. The thing to be careful of with some of these direct object pronouns, like la, los, and las, is that they look like what we've learned is the in Spanish. Okay? La can mean the, singular feminine, and los can mean the plural masculine, and las is the plural feminine. So in this sentence, los veo los lunes, we have to realize that this los is our direct object pronoun. This los goes with lunes. It means the Mondays, on Mondays. Okay, so we have to be careful when we're reading sentences to understand, is this direct object pronoun, or does it mean the that goes with the verb, and you just have to read for context. Now let's look at another type of sentence that uses direct object pronouns. We're going to talk about sentences that have an infinitive verb as part of a verb phrase, because the direct object pronoun can actually go in a different location in these sentences. So if we take this original question and just change it up a little bit, we could say, when are you going to see the boy? ¿Cuándo vas tú a ver al niño? Okay, so when are you going to see the boy? And then our infinitive verb here is to see. Okay, with an infinitive verb, we can do just what we did before. We can put that direct object pronoun right before the verb phrase. ¿Cuándo lo vas tú a ver al niño? And notice that it goes before the entire verb phrase, okay? Does not separate these verbs. Or, when we have an infinitive on the end of a verb phrase, we can actually attach that pronoun to the end of the infinitive verb. And then the infinitive becomes verlo. ¿Cuándo vas tú a verlo? This is actually attached to that. It's not a separate word anymore. And we can still have the direct object in the sentence, the original direct object, with the pronoun. So we could say, ¿Cuándo lo vas tú a ver? And then actually al niño. ¿Cuándo vas a verlo al niño? Okay. But notice that with these infinitives, we can either put it before or at the end, tack on to the end of the infinitive. If we wanted to negate, before we get to that, let's get to the answer. If we wanted to answer this question, we could say, I'm going to see the boy on Mondays. Okay? Voy a ver al niño los lunes. Again, we can take that direct object pronoun and put it right in front of the verb phrase. Lo voy a ver al niño los lunes. We could put al niño on there, or we could leave it out. It's optional. Or we can tack it onto the infinitive verb, just like we did in the question. Voy a verlo al niño los lunes. Okay? So with verb phrases that have an infinitive verb at the end of the phrase, we can put lo or la or whatever direct object pronoun we're using on the end of that verb. And optionally, we can put the direct object still in the sentence. If we wanted to say, I don't see the boy on Mondays, I'm not going to see the boy on Mondays, we would just simply put the no in front of the sentence again, just like we did in the simple verb sentence. No voy a ver al niño los lunes. No lo voy a ver los lunes. No voy a verlo al niño los lunes. So those are our first two types of verbs that we can use these direct object pronouns with. Another type of verb that we need to look at is the present progressive. Because with the present progressive, we can do something similar as with the verb that has an infinitive. So I'm going to write a couple of sentences here that show you how to use the direct object pronouns with the present progressive verbs. So here we have some sentences using the present progressive with direct object pronouns. If we wanted to say, I am seeing the boy now, we could say, Estoy viendo al niño ahora. And the direct object would be the direct object of the verb. Estoy viendo, what am I seeing? El niño. Estoy viendo al niño ahora. To use a direct object pronoun for niño, we would use the pronoun him or lo, and we would use it either before or tacked on to the end of the present progressive verb phrase. So we could say, lo estoy viendo ahora. we could actually keep that direct object in the sentence if we wanted to and say, lo estoy viendo al niño ahora. Or we can actually tack that direct object pronoun on to the end of the present progressive verb phrase. Estoy viéndolo. Okay, there it is, tacked right on to the end of viendo. Now, because we're tacking that onto the end, we need to add an accent mark, because we want to keep the pronunciation, the emphasis still on the original viendo for this verb. So we want to say viéndolo. That changes the number of syllables in the verb, so we have to add that accent mark to keep the pronunciation where we want it. And again, we can still keep the direct object in the sentence if we want to in Spanish. So it would be estoy viéndolo ahora, or estoy viéndolo al niño ahora.